Let's explore what could be done here with the single raw file. First up, I'm going to click the Auto button to have it analyze the scene, and that definitely helps. However, it's difficult to recover all the details here in the highlights. In this case, I'm going to pull the exposure down a little bit more and then further lift the shadows. That definitely helps. By pulling down the base exposure, I was able to bring back more in the sky. Now, I'm actually going to use contrast, and this is going to seem strange, but a negative value of contrast actually helps. This is going to further separate some of the details, and then using clarity, we could put back some of the contrast, but in a more selective way. And you see that dehaze further brings the sky back down, really helping. Now globally, let's bring out the color with some vibrance, and as you see, it's really coming along nicely. The use of shadows and highlights pulled in opposite directions is quite helpful. Then, to a lesser extent, using the black point and the white point, I can really push the outer boundaries. Taking a look at my histogram, I can see what's happening here. Notice that we have very minimal clipping in the shadows and highlights and significantly improved dynamic range. While I'm at it, let's click on the profiles here and scroll down. It's always a good idea to take a look at the camera matching profiles because you'll see some great presets for analyzing the raw file. Choosing clear in this case, or actually landscape, I could apply that. And then clicking close, I was able to simulate how the camera would have interpreted that. Let's go ahead and finesse this here. Just bring up the exposure ever so slightly. It's definitely looking better. Now, let's grab the graduated filter and click. And this allows me to create an adjustment from top to bottom. What we're going to do in this case is not overexpose it, but start to pull it down a little further. This helps bring in some of that depth, and I could roll the color temperature for the sky. Additionally, at the bottom down here, you can select a range mask. Let's turn that on, and by using these sliders, I can start to define where it applies. This allows me to set a nice transition to control it so it's not going to be so aggressive. So as it starts to get down here into some of the shadowy regions, you see that by clipping that, it falls off naturally and is limited to the sky. Let's uncheck that box there, and that's looking a lot better. We'll just dial in that exposure slightly and a little bit of clarity and dehaze to bring the sky out. Let's do a similar one here. We'll grab the radial filter and just drag to define this area. And let's pull that so it's not quite so bright. But instead of affecting the area outside the circle, I'm going to invert that. And what that does is allow me to apply the adjustment inward. Now, same thing, let's do a luminance mask and take a look at it. And by using the sliders here, we can better define the target. In this case, I'm going to remove some of the brighter areas so it doesn't start to affect the sky and the ground as much. There we go. That looks nice, and we can smooth that out a little bit. And now the adjustment is much better targeted to just the branches, allowing us to lift the shadows a little bit further and put some clarity and dehaze in to really pop that. And if we take a look there, you see it's doing a nice job. Now we've got this little mountain ridge here. Let's do the same thing. We'll create a simple blend and just target that area right in there and do a slight exposure lift. There we go. And let's just target that. And that's looking pretty good. And let's just pull down the shadow so it's not so aggressive. And as you see, doing multiple adjustments can really start to paint and bring out the areas. Now I like this, and it's just a little bit of give and take. You may find yourself needing to select an area that you previously worked with and dial it in so it's not so aggressive, but all told, that definitely helps. However, I'm also going to tell you that there's a certain benefit here of shooting brackets. So instead, if I just select the 5 exposures that I have, these were used to capture the full range of the scene, an underexposed image for the sun, and some overexposed images to really see the detail. Well, that really helps. So let's just select those raw files there. There we go. Like so. and I've got the 5 raw files from the bracket. And I'll just right click and choose to merge these. So let's go ahead and choose Photo Merge HDR. And that's going to invoke the photo merge right inside of Lightroom. This is going to help bring out some of the detail. And I'll click Merge. And what it does is creates a new raw file. There's the new merged file. Now let's go ahead and adjust that. And what you'll see is just a little bit more flexibility in the file using the HDR image. You can still do the same top to bottom type adjustment we were looking at earlier to further recover some of that sky. That's pretty cool. But let's try something else. I'm going to select the raw files here. Raw. There's another one. And in this case, let's send those to Aurora. File, plug in extras, transfer to Aurora HDR. This is going to do a more advanced blend using those source brackets. I like it. Let's go ahead and create it. And it's going to analyze each of those images and try to create a more photorealistic exposure where everything is properly exposed in the sky and the ground. Now, as you saw, I could do this in Lightroom, but it's a lot of fussing and a lot of painting and using graduated masks and using blending filters and all sorts of advanced controls that take a bit of time. Or I can just let the software analyze the images and find the best parts of each photo and blend them into a whole new photo. There we go. Looking pretty good. Really have a nice even exposure. Now, from my collection here, I'm going to go into landscape and just try a nice warm landscape. And I could adjust that. Or better sunrise and adjust the strength. That's quite nice. You see that you still have the ability to further recover areas. So using your shadows and your highlights and your whites and blacks, you can dial it in just like you were in Lightroom. Let's put a little bit of contrast in there. Using color, I can add some color contrast, which is improved. And we'll come down here. I see that there's a nice dawn LUT being applied, so I can dial the strength of that in, just a subtle amount. Let's put a little more polarizing on the sky. That looks great. And using HSL, we can come on over to luminance and just darken down the blues ever so slightly while bumping up the saturation to get a nice natural looking sky. And remember, our great adjustable gradient makes it super easy to define the top and bottom of the image. So I can actually pull down that top exposure just a little bit. There we go. Make it a little more vibrant and cooler and bump up the contrast. And we got a great sky. There's the before and the after, and just quite a bit of improvement. Remember, you can go ahead and further add adjustment layers and continue to play, but this really gets fast and simple. By taking advantage here, I'm just going to crank up the vibrance at the top of the page and the color contrast, but then click and add a gradient mask. And now I can create a nice gentle transition to the bottom so that warm color blends nicely with the bottom of the frame. So as you can see there, what I've been able to do when I click the Done button is apply that rich color just to the top. So fast, simple, and easy. Let's click Apply, and the image is automatically returned back to my Lightroom library. So that great overview of different types of processing using shadows and highlights, using the HDR that's built into Lightroom, or taking advantage of an advanced HDR method with Aurora HDR.